The title of today's message is Frenemies of God. And I think most of you know what frenemies mean. I always found it to be an interesting word. Those who in front of you behave like a friend, but behind you are your enemies. And then it hit me. It hit me how much of God's people are not really friends of God, but frenemies of God. Ever since I was young till today, and it will probably be that way as long as we are in these corruptible bodies and in our fallen nature. We will see people who will behave one way when they are in front of their religious leaders or perhaps in their houses of worship, but are totally different behind closed doors, and sometimes not even behind closed doors, but once they are away from the house of worship or away from their religious leaders. I'll go further. You know what? Let me go further. I've seen it in religious leaders. I've seen religious leaders who are very, very religious and go through the motions, appear to be friends of God on the pulpit, but behind closed doors, they are frenemies of God. They are not friends of God. It's interesting because in many ways, this pandemic, even though it's such a horrible thing that we even now continue to go through, it has exposed a lot of people, both in leadership and out of leadership. It has shown the great hypocrisy within humankind. So let's talk a little bit about this, because you know what? God is expecting of us. I think we forget that. I think we get so involved in God's grace, in God's mercy upon our lives, that we forget that there is an expectation, that God is expecting of us. If we look at 1 Peter chapter 2, and I'm just going to give you the chapter because I want you to stop just reading verses and really read these verses that I give you in context. So I'm going to just give you the chapter and you go look for the verse. And in doing so, enjoy the rest of the chapter. 1 Peter chapter 2 says, "So put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander." I may sound like a broken record sometimes, but that's because I'm just trying to drill things into your heads, into your consciousness, into your subconsciousness. We cannot, as a people, as God's people, continue to surf the line. You can't act like you love God and then do anti-God things. You can't act, for us Christians, like you love Jesus Christ and then do anti-Christ things. There is an expectation, and the expectation is that we are going to continue to work on ourselves. Now, I know what some of you think. You say, well, we can't be perfect. God will take care of it. God will take care of it. But God is expecting you to work on yourself. God is expecting you to try to be a better person. The key word there is to try. Look, I know the difference between people that I'm around who are trying and those who are not. And what makes you think that God doesn't know when you're trying or when you're not? What we're seeing in our world today, and again, this is not for you. I get people all the time, oh, Pastor, this was for me, or was this for me? If it's for you and the shoe fits, you wear it. What's wrong with that? If it's for you, you wear it. Sometimes I deliver a message and it hits me, it hits home to me. And the shoe fits me. And I wear it. What we're seeing in our world, what we're seeing in our nation, what we're seeing in our communities is malice. We make big deals about certain crimes, but we don't make big deals about all crimes. The news captures certain scenarios that, give them high ratings. They don't really care about what's happening in our communities or across our land. We get a situation involving a cop, it makes the news, and it should. We get people of different color skins, and it makes the news. But what happens? What happens when we're dealing with black on black and brown on brown crime? That doesn't make the news, and it's happening every day, every night. Because we're dealing with malice. We're dealing with a lot of deceit and hypocrisy. We're not coming to the Lord and emptying ourselves before our God. We're still keeping certain things to ourselves. We're still living lies. In the same chapter, 1 Peter chapter 2, it continues. It says, like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation. And then it says, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. Have you? Have you really tasted that the Lord is good? Tasting in Scripture is an experience. Have you experienced God in your life? Well, if you were one way, if you were dirty and pathetic and you were corruptible and all these things, and then you came to God and you are still nasty and pathetic and dirty, then you have not tasted that the Lord is good. Don't lie to yourself. You're not lying to me. When there is truly a change on the inside, it will show itself on the outside. You will change. It may not come overnight, but little by little you will be convicted and you will change. This is something that happens between you and God. In that same chapter, it says, as you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious. So what? So what if people will talk about you and criticize you and look at you wrong and say, oh, look at this. Oh, now they're trying to be a goody two-shoe or whatever they call it. Who cares? As long as you are doing what God is expecting of you, who cares? Oh, Pastor, but the streets we live in, and they're expecting me to be a certain way, look a certain way, but you know how my heart is, but I still got to look a certain. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? You're either on God's side or you're not. When you're on God's side, you don't have to go through the motions to try to impress your friends. You're impressive already because of the work God is doing in you. God is expecting, right? See, well, what is He expecting? What is God? God is expecting us to be a holy priesthood. To offer ourselves up as a sacrifice. But people are going through the motions in their houses of worship. As Christians, they're going through the motions in their churches. You know how many people have come to me and said, people who visited and supported our church, and they're like, well, you haven't opened up, so we're going to go elsewhere. We're going to go. Absolutely, go elsewhere. Go elsewhere and continue to do what it is you do.